This episode is sponsored by Team Builder, yet another company that's doing great things for the first responder community. As a strength and conditioning coach myself who also trains tactical athletes, dissemination of wellness information is one of the biggest challenges. Now, Team Builder is the premier strength and conditioning software for tactical athletes, and there are several features that really impress me. Firstly, there is a full exercise library, so you, the personal trainer, does not have to create that within your own department. Secondly, you can send out programming, but also individualize, which I love. So you blanket program for everyone. Now you can tweak based on someone's injury, someone's need to maybe drop some body composition, rather than having to write a program for every single person on their own. Team Builder also allows you to build custom questionnaires to collate health and wellness data. It integrates with wearables. And I think one of the most important things is obviously it tracks. To me, it's imperative that we as a profession start tracking our people from day one and then over the full span of their career, therefore catching potential wellness issues and injuries before they happen. Now, if you want to try Team Builder, they are offering you, the audience of the Behind the Shield podcast, a free 14-day trial to experience all of the features. And if you want to take a deeper dive into Team Builder, listen to episode 1032 with Melissa Mercado, or go to teambuilder.com. And I'll spell that to you because it's not as you'd think, teambuildr.com. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show fitness trainer, stuntman, and actor Aaron Williamson. Now, in this conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from his journey into the military, his transition into the world of coaching, becoming a technical advisor on military films, his transition into the world of stunts and performance, his powerful mental health story, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of well over 1,100 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Aaron Williamson. Enjoy. Well, Aaron, I want to start by saying two things. Firstly, thank you to our mutual friend, Christian, for making this connection. And secondly, to welcome you onto the Behind the Shield podcast today.
I appreciate that. Yeah, Christian's a good guy. I was just down in San Antonio and did a Murph with those guys. Great crew.
Yeah, it's a brutal workout. I'm assuming it was probably hot as balls there that day too.
Yeah, it was just starting to creep out. That sun was coming out pretty hard right at the end. We started pretty early, though.
Yeah, good idea. All right. Well, very first question. Where on planet Earth are we finding you today?
These days, I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well,
it's hot, but it's that dry heat. So I'll take it over the humidity any day.
Yeah.
I'm from the South.
Yeah. We're from, I'm living in Ocala, Florida now. So it's been like 106, 107 with that humidity. It's, yeah, brutal. When Floridians are saying that it's hot, then you know it's really freaking hot.
Yeah, I'm from Daytona Beach, Florida.
There we go. Down the road then.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, let's start there then. So tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings?
Grew up in Daytona Beach, Florida when it was party central. You know, got in trouble, did all the stuff you're not supposed to do. Just a normal, poor family. I mean, that's really it. You know, there's not a whole lot to say. My childhood just wasn't that great, which is what led me down the path to the Marine Corps. So Marine Corps is my salvation. It saved me.
What did your dad and or mother do as far as careers?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Just mediocre work for the city, fast food.
Now, what about, this is what's really interesting about these conversations is when you talk about our upbringing, we more often than not will look at parents maybe, but never beyond that. When you look at the kind of upbringing that your parents were exposed to that maybe created the childhood that you had, were there any kind of common denominators when you went back another generation?
Honestly, I don't even know, man. I'm not very good at my family history. I didn't. My relationship with my family is something that I'm still working on today. It wasn't that great for a long time. I joined the Marine Corps right out of high school, and I disappeared for a long time. I've only been home a handful of times.
What about sports? What were you playing during the school ages?
Everything: football, baseball, volleyball, track, anything to keep myself from getting in trouble.
And I heard you mention on the Medevac podcast about being a smaller kid when you were younger, which if people saw you now would be surprising for them.
Yeah, I had when I graduated Marine Corps boot camp, I was 160 pounds, which I think is probably the lightest I've ever been at 6'3". But growing up as a kid, man, I was really skinny. I started putting on a little bit of size in high school, just from playing sports and eating and, doing stupid drugs. Gives you the munchies.
And what about career aspirations? Again, when you were younger, what were you dreaming of becoming then prior to the military?
Nothing. No idea. I had no aspirations, no goals, no role models, no mentors, no guide, no guidance, no plan, no nothing.
So this is always, I think, a really important conversation, especially, I would argue, for us looking how to move forward and improve, the environment of the next generation, is the people that have come on here and there's been an absence of role models, whether parents were there and just not involved, whether they were, they left, whatever the thing was, they passed away, where the difference between someone staying on a bad path and ending up prison, dead, overdose, whatever, and turning that corner were the positive role models. Now, prior to that, you mentioned about straying into some negative areas. What was the environment that you grew up in as far as the pull from that negative role model?
I don't know what you mean by that.
So, for example, if a young kid grows up and there's a gang culture, that would be, that's all they know, that's their environment. It's easier to be pulled in that direction. When there's a positive mentor, like I'm assuming for you, within the Marine Corps itself, then it tends to steer young people back onto the right path. But the environment that you grew up in, were you kind of immersed in that kind of, as you said, the drugs, the negative side initially?
My family started getting a divorce when I was in middle school, and everything just fell apart. I started hanging out with the wrong crowd. You hang out with the wrong crowd, you get involved with the wrong stuff, and that's really it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, then so you're kind of, you're lost, you're wayward, you've played a multitude of sports. What even made you think about the Marine Corps, and talk to me about that on-ramp experience for you, from having no role models to being thrust into such rigid discipline?
It saved my life, and it was everything I needed. There was a guy on the varsity football team who graduated high school and joined the Marine Corps. And prior to joining, he was just a big meathead dude like Goldberg from WWE. When I saw him come back from Marine Corps boot camp, he was a completely different person. I didn't even recognize him. Everything about him was just different. And I knew that's what I needed, and that's what brought me into the ranks.
What about prior to this? Because we're going to obviously get into personal training. What did your fitness, weight training, strength conditioning programs look like prior to the Marine Corps?
There was none. No structure, no nothing. Just did whatever I thought was right. And looking back on it now, I don't even know what I was doing.
You hear that a lot, some, and again, not tarring everyone with the same brush, but you hear a lot of high school programs. The strength conditioning side is often done by people that maybe understand the game, but they don't understand the training element.
Yeah, it was just train. There was no no program or really much of anything.
Gotcha. Did you feel physically prepared for Marine boot camp?
No,
So,
no, I
talk to
had
me
no
about
idea
that.
what I was getting into. No idea what I was getting into.
So what was it that allowed you to succeed? Because you obviously went through it. So as you kind of were immersed in this new arena, who were the people that steered you in the right way? And then what was it that allowed you to progress when some people did ring the bell?
I don't know, man. Look, my whole childhood leading up to the Marine Corps, I really don't remember much of it. I can recall small details. Joining the Marine Corps, I just knew I was trying to escape becoming the person I didn't want to be. And that's really what it came down to. I got on the yellow footprints. I knew I was in a different world. The drill instructors were doing their thing, yelling and spitting and all this stuff. And I knew I was in an environment where I had no idea what was going to happen next, but I was open to it. And with an open mind, it really broke me down to the studs and forced me to rebuild my foundation on discipline. And that was the new chapter. That was the new me. That was my first transformation going through Marine Corps boot camp. I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was going to be more physical, but it was really more mental than anything. And that mental stress, that mental chaos was what took me to a place where I was able to, I think, really operate my best. Even to this day, I operate the best in chaos. I don't like chaos, but for some reason, I just have an affinity to be able to adapt to it and thrive in it.
And what about as far as the MOS? Like as you progressed through boot camp, what was the area of the Marines that you were focused on at that point?
Well, ultimately, I wanted to become part of Force Recon for the Marines. But when I got to my first duty station, my platoon commander was not, like, he was just not letting me go. It was I was with 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines. I got to my first duty station in the end of 1999, and it was like a bunch of bad news bears. So I was like, me and my buddy from Daytona Beach, we ended up at the same unit together, and we just kind of fed off each other. So we were squared away, shining our boots every day, ironing the camis, going to the gym every day, eating clean, just wanting to be the picture perfect Marine, because there was a lot of pride in it. Got promoted to a team leader as soon as I got there, which didn't bring much love from the crew. To have some boot Marine, in charge of an NCO, that doesn't go down too well. So infantry ended up being where I got stuck. And I say I got stuck because it's what put a bad taste in my mouth from the beginning. Is having bad leadership can really ruin the experience for you. And I think that's across the board in every industry. There's bad leaders everywhere. And part of what I do now is making sure that I can use my past experiences and life experiences to help people not be bad leaders, because it can literally ruin someone's life.
This is something that we see in the first responder professions. You get these people that progress through the ranks that just have no business being there, and they have all the pieces of paper. They were able to climb the rungs, but as far as actual leadership, as far as managing as individuals, as far as being, firm when you need to, and then vulnerable when you need to as a leader, there's a complete absence of that. And I think I would argue humility was probably the thing that was lacking. When you reflect back now at that moment, and then any other leadership kind of challenges that you've had through the last 20 years, what are the mistakes that these poor leaders are making, and then what are the attributes that you see in the good leaders that you've worked alongside?
I think there's a big misconception about leadership, that it has to be loud. You got to be the one that everyone notices because you're the loudest. And I think it should be the opposite. Being a good leader is about, being there for others in the worst times, in the dark times, in the chaos, and, to be able to have that trust in someone who's not going to throw you under the bus. For me as a leader, I was very stern, but quiet. I was loud when I needed to be loud, but other than that, there was no reason to be loud all the time. And I think that's a big issue today is leaders feel like they need to be loud and seen and heard, and it's just not the case.
Absolutely. When you were in that branch, did you ever come across Major James Capers, or his story at least? He was.
I'm somewhat familiar with it.
Yeah, he's one of the original recon Marines, Vietnam era. He was wounded. Very long story short, he's got all his men on a helicopter. He jumped off because it was too heavy. They dragged his ass back on again. They managed to take off, but he was African American and probably one of the Medal of Honor recipients that was denied that medal because of skin color at that point. So even to this day, they're trying to still get the Medal of Honor for him. But I had him on. I went up to South Carolina a while ago and interviewed him at his home. But definitely one of the legends of your branch there.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I was with General Pace for a while at the Pentagon. He had talked about him a little bit.
Yeah, incredible, man. Well, you mentioned about wanting to get into recon. How did that end up transitioning to the kind of funeral detail side?
When I was in Okinawa, Japan, on one of my pumps, my company first sergeant kept talking about it, and I'm like, I was like, you're telling me that there's a section where you can lift weights and carry caskets and represent the Marine Corps, and I want to be part of that. So he started making some calls, and when I got back from that deployment, they actually came down to Camp Lejeune and strength tested me. I didn't pass it, and I was just planning on moving on. I was getting ready to go to squad leader school, and before I was ready to punch out, the career planner called me into his office and said, "Hey, when do you want to take leave?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You got cut orders to DC to be a part of the body bearers." So it's a checklist, that the strength is just one piece. The strength can always be built. It's the type of person you are, the character, your values, your morals, how you carry yourself, how you present yourself, how responsible you are. All those details go into it, because when you're laying someone to rest, that's a huge moment. And I call it my most humble duty, because when you lay someone to rest, it's the last image a family is going to have of that loved one. So it was a very surreal experience to have been a part of that detail, and I ended up becoming the section leader. So we trained hard, we trained heavy, we trained for perfection all the time.
Now, you mentioned Okinawa before we kind of go a little bit further into that. One of the things that's really interesting is that Okinawa is one of the only blue zones on planet Earth. And if we're talking about health, nutrition, etc., it has, and I think even Japan now, it's extended through the whole island, has the highest population of people 100 or older than the planet. And it's always interesting to hear people that were stationed in Okinawa or just happen to live in Okinawa, as far as the observations of the culture, the food, the exercise level, that creates such longevity in those populations. So do you remember kind of any of those kind of elements when you were stationed there, as far as the Okinawan people themselves?
Well, I was on Camp Schwab, and we really didn't leave base that much. We were just a bunch of grunts. And there was a lot of protests all the time outside the base. So I don't think we were necessarily wanted there. So it's not like we were just out in town all the time. So I don't have a whole lot of memory of being out in town, although I remember when I was, the people were very nice. I was very tall, comparatively speaking. The food was incredible. I really enjoyed Okinawa a lot. We were on Orwan Beach. I don't know if you're familiar with Camp Schwab. It's where amphibious recon is. But I mean, it was just, whenever we had libo or off time, we'd just be out in the water snorkeling and swimming and lifting weights and staying out of the jungle.
I lived in Japan for 15 months, and I remember, and I'm only 6 foot, but standing on the subway, and I could see over almost everyone's head, and like
Yeah.
this doesn't happen at home. Normally, I'm kind of like average, but yeah, it's the
Well, even some of the, well, not some, even a lot of the buildings walking into, you got to, duck your head. They're not built for tall people.
no, even the clothes. Yeah, this Gaijin is a different size completely. All right. Well, then going back to the funeral day detail, correct me if I'm wrong. That kind of straddled 9/11. Is that right?
Yeah, it did. So we were, I remember when the funeral started picking up, with a lot of the service members coming in from being killed in action. And out of Arlington National Cemetery, at one point when this all started, Section 60 was just a bare piece of land, just grass, maybe a couple of tombstones, and it was just filling up by the day. I mean, it was unreal to see how quickly these headstones were coming up and how many funerals were being done there. So it was definitely, and especially too, even burying people that you knew maybe from boot camp or from another unit or something like that. So, it's definitely put a lot into perspective.
How did you process that? Because I've had a few people on. Sadly, one a Gold Star father who lost his son, and he was a naval. The same detail as you, bringing the caskets home, and the weight of that, the moral injury of, like you said, some of these people that you remember in boot camp, and now you're bringing them home in a casket covered in a flag. So you already had these struggles when you were younger. You had this kind of healing element when you first enlisted, but now you're in a very, very traumatic position. So how were you able to kind of process what you were doing?
I really don't know. I don't really know how to put that into words. I just remember I always wanted my Marines and the funeral to be flawless, because I wanted the family to be proud of what the Marine Corps represented and how we treated their loved one when we were laying them to rest. What we do in the Marine Corps that the other services don't do is when we get to the hole, we raise the casket as a final salute, which takes a lot of strength. But it's just our way, our last way of saying, thank you for your service. I don't really know how to put that one into words to describe it. It's really just wanting to make sure that we do that service member and their family justice.
Was there any kind of element, when you reflect back now with this mature lens that you have, any element of healing at this point, or do you think you'd still kind of push things down up to then?
Oh, I pushed things down for a long time. Yeah, it wasn't even until long after I was out of the military, deep into Hollywood, that I was able to start processing some of the stuff.
Well, let's talk about transition then, because that can be so jarring for military members, first responders. You've had this certain upbringing. You find this incredible tribe within the military, within a fire station. You've got purpose, you've got shared suffering, you've got all these things that are incredibly healing. And then one day, you don't anymore. And that can be so jarring for our service members, for our first responders. What made you decide to pull the trigger on transitioning out? And what was that initial experience like for you?
When I ended my active service, I went to Iraq to be part of the identity management mission. At the time, it was all classified. So SecDef wanted to safeguard all the bases. How do you do that? Well, biometrics. So we were the test bed for the DoD Biometrics Task Force. So for the first 2 years, I was doing base access. I was the operations manager, ended up moving into the country manager position. So there was a lot of traveling involved to make sure that things were functioning as they as they should. But with all the travel, obviously, you're going to encounter danger. It's inevitable. And the longer you're over there, the more things are going to happen that, you're going to have to figure out how to deal with once it's all said and done and over and you're out of there. The second 2 years, I moved more into a liaison position, working directly with the Iraqis, a liaison with the U.S., helping them stand up their own biometric capabilities. And at the end of those 2 years is when we started transitioning everything back over to the Iraqis, and it started getting much more dangerous at the time. And it just got to the point where things were becoming, there were too many close calls. And, I had the opportunity to leave and I took it. I knew it was time to go. So I took a leap of faith and moved to New Orleans to do some more contract work with the Marine Corps. Marine Forces North is out of New Orleans. So that's where I went, man. I just took a leap and said, I'm out. I can't do it anymore. I'm done.
Reflecting back on the time in Iraq for a moment, I've said this asked this on many of these interviews of people that have found themselves forward deployed. Excuse me. One thing that we get back at home is an extremely polarized perspective when it comes to the news, how war is portrayed. Either, kill them all, let God sort them out, or they're all baby killers. And in between are our men and women that are out there with our flag on their shoulder, protecting that country, protecting our country. Two-part question. The first part, regardless of the politics that sent you out there, was there a point where you realized there were some horrific people that needed to be taken care of, even though obviously you were in this biometric role?
100%. A lot of the locals who I worked with directly, whether in the government or civilians, were very grateful that we were there. And I was able to develop some really close friendships with some of the local Iraqis. And, as a result of that, of their sacrifice, and when I say their sacrifice, some of these locals, just by working with us, lost their entire families. Come home, their whole family's hanging in the front yard trees, or who knows what happened to them. They get kidnapped. So yeah, there's some horrific people there, and I think it's really hard to wrap your mind around how there can be such little value for human life. And, one of the things that bothers me here in this country is we have it so good. But the stupidity is just so outrageous here because there's no perspective. There's no cultural perspective to compare how good we have it here, because most people have never even left this country. But when you go over there and you see how a lot of these people are living, and you kind of lose sight of the political side of it. You kind of lose sight of why you're over there. You just have a mission to do, and that mission is to, try and help these people. And that's what I was doing, and that's what my team was doing, and that's what I thrived on doing. And I think when you're genuine about it, you'll see the good people versus the bad people. But that bad presence you were talking about, man, that evil is just on a whole nother level.
Well, this is the other thing as well. I mean, you just alluded to it for a second. We don't hear the kindness and compassion either on the news, whether it's of our own military or the indigenous population that you guys are serving alongside or trying to protect. So when you reflect, what were some of those beautiful elements about that culture?
I think really, the family, just how close-knit the family and friends are. The gatherings they have, the feasts that they have together, the celebrations they have, things that we don't really do a whole lot here or to that degree. The way they celebrate sports, the way they, I don't know. It's a very different culture. I guess this is the best way to explain it. You know, the culture is very, very, very different. And it's really cool to be able to have that cultural perspective. You know, when you travel the world and you visit these countries and you see the difference in cultures, but at the end of the day, every culture has its evil. And especially in that part of the world, that evil is just dead set on carnage and torment, and all the stuff here in the States we're not exposed to. And if you were exposed to it, you'd have a whole different outlook on life.
What I see is it's insidious as well, meaning, it's like a death by 1,000 cuts. It's not just suddenly someone pops up who's just atrocious in our society and like, okay, well, that person needs to go. It's that, that frog in the boiling water, it starts off cold and it slowly turns the heat up. And history is full of these lessons of exactly when that has happened, whether it's Nazi Germany or we can go back to British history and American history and all these other areas. And I think what's such a spit in the face for all the people that were lost previously is, as you said, that we allow this to happen again. We allow this division to happen, regardless. I don't care what anyone's political leanings are. When people are put in front of us that are dividing a nation, to me, that's the opposite of leadership. Just like we talked about earlier, if you're a Marine leader and half, you got the two sides of a platoon working against each other, then that's not leadership. It's no different on the national level. But hearing all these stories that I have, whether it's our war fighters or people from all over the world, the storytelling, these atrocities that have happened, the question is, when are we going to learn from them? If we're not hearing, stories like yours, if we're not looking back in the history and go, we need to make sure it doesn't happen again, we're just setting ourselves up for yet another incident. And we're seeing it around the world to this day.
Yeah, I remember there was a point in time where it didn't matter if you were a Democrat or Republican. You could have hard conversations. You could talk to people. You could have friends who were on whatever political side. It didn't matter. And for some reason now, you can't. God forbid, you talk to someone on the other side, your family will disown you now. I mean, I don't know what's happening with this country, but it makes me sick to my stomach. And I have a very hard time talking about it because, again, it's back to people watch the silly ass news, base their opinions off of whatever these reporters and commentators are saying. When I was at the Pentagon, I had a TSSCI clearance, and I just remember, being privy to many things that were highly classified, and you knew the real story of what was going on. And then all of a sudden, a couple of days later, you see it trickle out in the news, and you're like, "It's not what the fuck happened." Mm-hmm. Like, it's got a little bit of it, So it's like we're just being played. I don't know, man. I'm just so grateful to live in this country, and I'm grateful to have served. I would do it over again and again and again and again. I just wish that we as a society would wake up and understand how good we have it here, because I don't know what the future looks like. It kind of terrifies me knowing what my daughters are going to have to go through and what their kids are going to have to go through, if there's even going to be anything left.
I'm what I always say, an incurable yet angry optimist. I feel like the wheels are coming off the illusion that's created this recently. Like you said, news. I mean, CNN, Fox, same exact blueprint. I mean, just take one step back and look. The screen's divided. There's four assholes arguing with each other. It's not news, as you said. It's commentary. It doesn't matter if it's left or right. I had a guy on a couple of times now, Larry Doyle, who was one of the last really respected journalists. He interviewed Nelson Mandela, the first interview when he came out of Robben Island. That says the kind of trust that this man had. And he was talking about, there was a turning point. I think it was either late 80s or early 90s, where the news went from being owned by an organization and was just given a massive budget to go and report the news, period. That's it. to, oh, now we need the news to start making money. I think it was Rupert Maxwell, that kind of era. And so we saw this shift where it was all the clickbait and all the, the pieces that got people angry, and then it got more and more divisive. And then you look at the political system, where I don't care, again, what you lean towards. If we have a system where cigarette companies, weapons manufacturers, fast food, alcohol, big pharma can pay these people to become president, that's also a broken system. So, to me, I think we're starting to see finally, like, the general public is seeing the corruption that's behind the way we choose these air quotes leaders, and, the things that are behind the news. Like you said, you've got the truth and then you've got this facade of the truth. I hope that the Jenga blocks are starting to come down. And I think documentaries and podcasts and, books are starting to be cool again. So I hope that we're going to begin a new revolution where, as you said, your daughter's, going to go into an era of awakening. I really do, because all these things that have been put in front of us have got so extreme now that even the extremists are starting to scratch their heads. So I find that encouraging.
Yeah, I pray we get our shit together. Yeah, that's really it. I mean, we're weak, fat, sick, and lazy. Like, let's go out and move. Let's get healthy. Let's eat good food. Let's have gratitude for how good we have it here. Because I can guarantee you can get on a plane and go somewhere tomorrow that you're gonna realize how good you have it here in this country. And I always say it wherever I was in the world, I couldn't wait to get back home.
Absolutely. I literally went to Crescent Beach yesterday with my wife and was walking on the beach, and there was a pod of dolphin swimming, 100 feet from where we were. So we watched them for a while, carried on up the beach, came back, and in a different place, the same pod, I'm assuming, were now surfing the waves, literally like catching waves and coming into like 50 feet from where we were. And I said to my wife, I'm like, this is America. Like, whether you're sitting in a forest in Seattle or on a mountain in North Carolina, wherever it is, this is the country. And there are beautiful people, but the people on Fox News and the people that show up every 4 years to get your vote, that's not America at all. And, this whole, well, then if you don't like it, get out. No, don't get out. Stay here, fix it. This is worth fighting for. But I truly believe that, there is hope. You mentioned strength and conditioning. It's kind of a good transition then. You find yourself in Louisiana. Talk to me about that transition. You're outside the Marine Corps now. You've come back from Iraq. Was that jarring, or were you able to just kind of keep your mind busy with the next step?
I had a plan in mind, and it just backfired massively. I went through a bad divorce too while I was overseas, which didn't help the matters when I came back to transition. But the plan I had, it didn't work out like I had thought. And it just left me in a place where I was trying to find work. Couldn't find work, burning through all my money, have financial responsibilities, realized that, hey, no one can read a veteran's resume, which was a big problem. So long story short, I ended up losing everything I had, filed for bankruptcy, ended up living out of my car, lost my purpose. My soul was broken. I'm like, how the hell did I go through this entire Marine Corps, process, this career I was able to have at the highest level. And then all of a sudden here I am now, just broken with nothing and nobody. So there were a lot of hard moments where I had to pull my head together and try and figure out, like, where do I go from here? What happens next? What's my pivot? Is there a pivot, or do I just end it? So out of desperation, I turned to the one thing that I never wanted to share with anybody, and that's my fitness. I was known throughout my entire Marine Corps career for my fitness. No matter where I was or what I did, everyone just knew me for fitness. And in turning to that out of desperation, I landed right in the middle of Hollywood South. I didn't realize in New Orleans, specifically Louisiana, there were more TV shows and movies being shot there than anywhere else because of the tax credit. So the gym that I started personal training at ended up being a really hot spot for a lot of celebrities because it was a small boutique gym in uptown New Orleans that was 24/7, very private place. That's where I met Zac Efron when he came in actually doing a movie about a Marine Iraq veteran. And that's where we met. They brought me to set, and they brought me on board as technical advisor for this movie called The Lucky One. And that was my entrance into film and TV. And from there, I started making relationships, and yeah, that was the infancy of, I don't even know what to call this thing.
Right.
I really don't, man. It was like, I could just call it destiny, part of God's plan.
You mentioned when you were younger that you just trained. There wasn't any strength and conditioning component. What was that evolution? I'm assuming, obviously, when you entered the Marine Corps, from really not understanding that world at all to being known for your fitness and strength at the end of it.
I just did what I saw other people doing when I was a kid. I didn't know my ass from a hole in the ground. When I joined the Marine Corps, I mean, there's not a whole lot to do outside of drinking when you're off. I don't party, I don't drink, I don't do any of that stuff. The Marine Corps zapped all that out of me. So I started training at the gym, reading the muscle magazines. I fell in love and got bit by the bug when I was in Okinawa. That's when I really started to transform. And then when I went to the bodybuilder section, that was part of the daily duty. I mean, we had waivers to eat as much food as we want. We had waivers for our uniforms to be able to get elastic put in them so that we didn't rip them when we were carrying caskets. We were just big dudes. And so I just, when people would go out on the weekends, I was at the vitamin shop or bookstore reading books, trying to educate myself. I was just immersed in nutrition and fitness, and I would come up with all these different protocols and try them on myself and experiment and see how I liked it. I would run different training blocks. I would copy, bodybuilders who I liked their style of training, and just started learning all these different modalities of hypertrophy training and strength training and different nutritional protocols and all this stuff. So I just got really good at understanding how to manipulate the body through training and exercise, and then obviously sleep and all that stuff. But that was kind of the evolution throughout my Marine Corps career, which prepared me for Hollywood, because Hollywood South was a transient place. It was where actors came into film and then they left and went back home. So I didn't necessarily have long workups to be with an actor. I was like the crunch time guy. So I had to really be good and confident in my abilities. And I was, and I still am. I made some massive transformations in very short periods of time, but it required a lot of discipline, and it required a lot of communication with production, with the actor's assistant, and really with the actor too. And I think it's what really brought me into the action genre more than anything, because those are the guys that are more serious about training than anyone else. If you're doing, working with someone who's just got to do a bedroom scene, chances are you're not going to get a lot of intensity out of them. But if you got someone who's in an action film, let's just say a Marvel movie or something, and their character is a superhero, I mean, all this, like everything I did fits right into that, that wheelhouse. So it was great. I loved working with these action guys because they were all in. The Rock, cut from the same cloth, man. Like, it was cool training him because we both live it. You know what I mean? So when you run across people like that, it's a really fun time. But some actors, they just, they wear discipline like a costume.
I have sushi envy with The Rock. To be able to afford that much sushi all the time, I wish.
Yeah, right.
Zac Efron, I remember him. I forget where it was. I don't know if it was one of his things he did with Darren O'Lean or it was somewhere else, but he was talking about, I'm assuming it was Baywatch. He said preparing for a film and he got so lean and, dieted to a point where it actually made him sick for a long time. I talk about the danger of driving our children in high school, college to a high level of performance at the detriment of their wellness and longevity, whether it's through injury, burnout, etc. But if you think about Hollywood, whether it's Daniel Day-Lewis, starving himself for a role, or whether it's someone like Zac Efron getting, insanely lean for a specific part, there's got to be that kind of moral compass as well as a trainer to be like, look, I can get you to a certain point, but there is a level where it's going to be dangerous for you, your kidneys or whatever it is. So how have you been able to kind of navigate that? Have you had people wanting to push further than is ethically responsible for a trainer?
Yeah. Well, you got to figure too, one thing that actors have to deal with is not all actors, when you're at the upper echelon of your career, you're basically going from movie to movie, movie to movie to movie to movie. You never know what you're going to have to look like from one movie to the next. So you might have to be out of shape for this movie and then literally roll right into this next movie and be in shape. Well, there's got to be some proper planning and structure to the routine to be able to make that happen. I did a movie with Josh Brolin called Old Boy, a Spike Lee remake. And what we did there was a really crazy transformation because he had to put on all this weight. And it would be similar to like what Tom Hanks did in Castaway, although that movie, they had like the whole year, it's like they did part of it, they broke, and then they came back and finished. We didn't have that opportunity because of the budget. So you're within the constraints of whatever the production budget is too. So that movie, I remember sitting down with the producers and the director talking all this through, and I was confident I can do it, but I knew there was a certain level of risk associated with it because I fluctuated his body weight by close to 60 pounds over just a few weeks. So it will, in Josh's mind, when he was finishing the movie up in Massachusetts, we were talking, he's like, should I start eating pizza and burgers? And I'm like, no, I need you to get in the best shape you can get into before you come here. And he was like, phew. And then when he got to New Orleans and the producer saw him, they were like, he's supposed to be out of shape. And I'm like, you gotta trust me. So if he came into the production fat, like literally fat, there's no way we could have stripped all that off. So this is where you had to get creative. And I consulted with doctors and nutritionists and everything, but essentially it was like food sensitivity testing. We did that. I had everything ready to roll by the time he got here. We loaded him up on all the stuff his body did not want to create inflammation. Once we created all the inflammation, we did like some sodium loading and had him on creatine and stuff. So it was a lot of water weight, just super puffy, not healthy. And then obviously stripping all that water weight off over the weekend or over the course of a few days. When he left set at the end of the week and came back to set the following week, there was actually some, I forgot what his name was, James Ransom. They did some big interview and he was talking about it. He's like, dude, he looked like a different person when he came. So it's cool. But at the same time, I remember with Josh, I was on him every day. I was calling him. I was at his house. I was making sure everything was on point because when you're doing something on the riskier side, you want to make sure that there's nothing happening that's going to put him in an even more risky situation than he's already in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just, there's no way you can feel good putting on that much weight, that much water weight and inflammation.
Yeah, we actually became friends, and it was after he did Only the Brave. So then he's doing, rocking and getting ready to be, have the same kind of fitness. And he was a volunteer wildland firefighter for 3 years in Arizona, years prior.
Josh, Josh is like, he's one of the best dudes, man. Like, he's literally one of the best dudes. I freaking love him. Him, J.K. Simmons. I mean, they don't get all caught up in that, BS environment of superficial stuff.
No, I mean, he literally became friends with a random firefighter that started a podcast, in Ocala. So, yeah, that's the humility that he had. Cool. He ended up writing the foreword for my first book. So there we go. I mean, that kind of shows who he is. Exactly. Well, just before we progress, another interesting thing, you're talking about all this deliberate nutritional skewing to project a form of faux obesity in an actor. I've heard this a lot in these kind of before and after, Instagram, whether it's nutritional supplements, whether it's training systems, and few people have told me that actually the before is the after and vice versa, that they get in great shape and then they fake, the before. I'm assuming, is that the same kind of thing that you're seeing here?
Well, no, we had to legitimately do it from getting big to getting lean.
Yeah, no, what I mean is the influencers are usually in great shape and they fake being out of shape for that after picture.
Yeah. So we see things from a movie perspective. We're like, oh, he's fat and then he gets in shape. But what's the easiest way to film that? Well, let's get him in shape so he knows he's getting in shape. We'll film that part of the movie first, and then he can start getting out of shape, which is going to be easier to film that way because there's no real way to flip that and be on the same timeline. It's impossible. So yeah, that part happens a lot. You'll see a lot of films where when you see that transformation, a lot of time that's flipped. That's correct.
What is your perspective on the fitness world when it comes to social media, the nutritionists, all the so-called experts now? I just had a great conversation with Julien Pineau, who's a revered strength and conditioning coach, unfucked a lot of CrossFitters back in the day. And he was saying, like, this is, kind of COVID, and then that has really destroyed the industry because the average person doesn't even know who to trust anymore.
Exactly. It drives me nuts. It makes me sick to my stomach because everyone's a coach now. And I look at this whole fitness piece from a different perspective, right? There's all this biohacking stuff. There's peptides. There's all these different nutritional protocols. There's all these different training protocols. No one ever agrees on anything. Doesn't matter how successful you are. Like, it's just a controversial shit show. You can't open your social media without seeing someone bashing someone else or someone creating a video talking smack about someone else. There's no camaraderie in the community. Everyone's out to make a buck. Everyone's trying to create their own system. For me, the approach that I have is, that's great. There are all these different things, but fitness has levels. And to the mainstream, let's just say mainstream America, you could give the most optimal elite program to the average American and they'll still fail because their lifestyle habits aren't right. Their mindset's not right. So it's like there's foundational things that you need to tackle and work on before you even get into all that other stuff. So it's partly why I'm not on social media talking about all this. And there's a reframe that's about to happen right now because I'm about to relaunch my business and talk about what I'm talking about now to the people who need to hear what I'm saying now. Because all these people yapping on social media are talking to the fitness community or talking to people who are a little more dialed in than the average American. Well, I want to help the average American. I want to help them unfuck their nasty habits because they're so lost and confused right now based on everything that you're saying. You read one thing, you're like, oh, great. And then you turn the page and it contradicts what you just read. And you're like, shit, I look at this guy and he's saying this. And then I turn around and look at this guy and he contradicts everything he just said. And it just keeps going and going and going. It's horrible. I mean, I love fitness, but I cannot stand the fitness industry because it's just so corrupt with everyone trying to make a buck.
I had James, and I'm blanking on his last name, UFC fighter, was behind the movie Game Changers. It was the plant-based movie. And it was funny because I went to LA and interviewed him, and on the Joe Rogan podcast, I think it was Chris Kresser, who I believe is a acupuncturist or chiropractor. I think it's acupuncturist. But they were tearing apart the Game Changers movie the first time. And 3 hours of just talking shit. And I don't get me wrong, I love Joe Rogan's podcast overall. So James has actually said, well, hey, can you not put this out yet? Because I'm about to go back on the Joe Rogan podcast and defend my movie. And so I don't want to give him any secrets in, the conversation that we had. So I held it for a bit. He went on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I listened to both of these. And the second one was, them just going back and forth and arguing. And what I had talked to James about is, and this is ironically, I underlined by 6 hours of this conversation prior, was the problem is you've got the carnivores arguing, just like you said, with plant-based or keto or, whatever the thing. And in the nutritional world, for example, no one's talking about where they all agree. If you are on carnivore, if you're on keto, if you're on most of these, there is a common denominator where you are removing processed shitty food from your diet. So you might be the right kind of, genotype where veganism works for you. You might be for carnivore. But the point is, if you're removing all the shit food, you're going to make a huge impact. And I think this is, what you're talking about is we're confusing people with, oh, my way is the best way, rather than, well, hold on, what are we all doing that would work for someone no matter which way they lean as far as diet, type of diet?
What I say is adherence. What can you be like? What can you maintain adherence to? Because whatever that is what you need to do. If at the end of the day, they all all the diets work if you can be adherent to them. And it's as simple as that. It's about finding the one that makes you feel the best, that gives you the results you want, that you can stay adherent to. It's as simple as that. And for the people who are saying you got to do it this way, bullshit. There's no such thing as a cookie cutter diet, just like there's no such thing as a cookie cutter training program. Everybody's different. Everybody's biology is different, especially in this day and age when everyone's loaded up on processed foods and medication. You know what I mean? Like you start getting into a place where you can feel good, get your blood work done, see what your internal biology is, your hormones, address those, and then start like baby stepping into it and figure out what you like, what makes you feel good. And that's going to be the route that you want to go down. But I say try all of it. Try all of it and see what you like best.
100%. Yeah, they say that the best training routine is the one you stick to. So, I mean, triathletes are fit, powerlifters are strong. You got to find the thing that you love to do. And then, if there's some deficit in some areas, mobility, whatever it is, then just work on that as well. But I mean, I've always said to the people when I coach them, is like the hardest thing you did was walk through the door. That's it. Once you're here, you're going to get swept away with the workout.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And when you think about the training programs, and you think about the nutritional protocols, there's success stories behind every single one of them. So obviously they all work, but do they work for you?
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned the film industry in Louisiana. You started off as a technical advisor, then you're doing some strength and conditioning work. How did you find yourself in the other profession I did aside from firefighting, which was the stunt world?
I got into training some bigger name actors pretty quick, which brought a lot of notoriety. And with the notoriety, I got to meet a lot of directors and producers and, a lot of people behind the cameras who make a lot of decisions and call a lot of shots. And when they were training with me, they were asking if I ever thought about getting in front of the camera because of my physique and my presence and my look and just the way I carried myself. And I said, I told all of them, like, no, I didn't even like this, me training you wasn't even in the cards. You know what I mean? Like I had no idea I would have anything to do with Hollywood. I just watched movies and watched TV shows, but now I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to go explore that. So I got an acting coach, started getting into the acting stuff, and realized how much of a craft and art it actually is, which most people are completely ignorant to. And that actually was something that started helping. We're talking about all those emotions and stuff. It became another source of therapy for me. That's a big reason why I like acting, is you can take all these jacked up emotions that you would never be able to do anything with, and now you can start to use them, and you can really have you can really have an unlock with all of it, right? Because when you get all that shit out, it's like, man, you just feel so good. And then the stunt community is a whole different beast, because it's almost there. It kind of reminds me of the military a little bit, the stunt community, because it's so close knit, and you can't just say you want to get stunts and you're automatically in. I want to do stunts. All right, here's a role. It doesn't even work like that. You gotta work your way in. You got to prove yourself, because at the end of the day, the stunt world is a very dangerous place. And not only can you get hurt or killed, but you can get someone else hurt or killed. And I think that's a huge piece of why you have to work with people who you trust and want to be around. Because if someone's just lackadaisical and wants to get in stunts just because they want to say they're a stunt performer or a stunt double, well, you're going to get someone hurt, if not killed. And you're not going to represent what the stunt community really stands for.
Did you ever get told by your Marine friends or your military friends how cool it was that you were a stunt person, and then by your stunt friends how cool it was that you were a Marine? Because I remember getting those two opposing things. And like you said, yeah, there are some really kind of interesting elements of stunt work, but I've always said to the fireside, no, we do stunts for real in the fire service. There is no choreo practice and that kind of thing. There is no script. But there is, even with the professions that deal with real danger, there's still this kind of allure of the stunt world from the first responders in my profession.
Yeah. There was a lot of back and forth talking about that kind of stuff, for sure, because there's a relatability there that you can speak to, specifically in the camaraderie side. It's unlike any other part of the industry, in my opinion.
The new Naked Gun film just came out with Liam Neeson, and a bunch of my stunt friends posted that they worked with it. And I was looking at the credits at the end, and it's amazing through the last 20 years. And I just did live stunt shows. I didn't do the films or the television as a stunt person. But so many people I've worked with were in that film. So just like you said, it's a much smaller group than people realize.
Yeah, I always, if I'm watching a movie, I always watch the credits because I want to see who's in it that I know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So what about Bright? I actually, ironically, haven't seen it. It always pops up. I mean, it's one of those ones that's on my list, but I have not seen it yet. But was that one of the bigger kind of opportunities for you?
Yeah, Bright was a bigger one for me. I remember going into David Ayer's office. It was a big group of us, and we were all standing around. He was just looking at us, and he could tell he knew the type of person he wanted. Like he just knew. And it was like you like so it's like if you're in the right company with the right stunt guys, there's some pretty great opportunities you can have. But one thing on the stunt side for me is, especially being like the newer guy, I just kept my mouth shut. I'm not trying to yap and, trying to fit in and trying to make myself stand. Like I was hired to do a job. I'm going to do that job the best I can do. And hopefully when I leave that show or that movie, that production, someone else will want to work with me again because I did a good job and I was easy to work with. And I think that makes a big difference, because you see a lot of the new guys come in and they're trying to fit in and they can't stop talking, and all they're doing is asking questions, and they're trying to stand out and do stuff in front of the director. And it's like the stunt coordinator's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, go sit down and shut up. It was cool. Bright was the first time that I wore prosthetics, and that sucker was extensive. when we were doing the camera test the first week, I mean, the first day we were in the chair for like over 12 hours, maybe 12, 13 hours,
Crazy.
just trying to get all the makeup right. Once we finally got it dialed in, it was 3.5 hours application and about 30 to 45 minutes to remove it, plus the duration of filming. So kudos to Joel Edgerton for wearing that for the entire production, because, for the stunt team, we were kind of we were in and out. It's not like we were there the whole duration like he was. So cold glue on your face at 5 a.m. and trying to chew food through these big fake lips. but it was a good time. I enjoyed that one.
What about near misses? One of my guys I used to do the pirate stunt show with in Orlando years ago literally broke his back falling from we had a sword fight on a mast, and he transitioned to a crow's nest, and you're supposed to climb down, and there was a high fall, but that was later. He ends up tripping, falling all the way down, missing the mat, hitting the concrete pad, a near fatal injury, to be honest. So our industry, obviously, it happens sometimes. Like you said, it is a dangerous job, and one slip, one loss of focus can be deadly. So were there any kind of near misses in your career that you remember?
No, not for me personally. And then also too, you get beat up doing stunts. That's inevitable.
Yeah.
But nothing detrimental where, for any productions I was involved in, or me personally, there was nothing to that degree, other than, when you're taking a fall down, who knows how many flights of stairs, or when you got to jump out of a window, or you're getting beat up and you got to keep taking a fall and you can't wear the pads you're supposed to be wearing because you don't have a shirt on, and it's stuff like that. But that's part of doing stunts.
Absolutely. Yeah. I never had that repetitive element. Ours was live. So no matter, if you got a sword stuck in you or something, you had to keep carrying on and just try and play it off if it wasn't terrible. All right. Well, then you talked about the healing element of acting, because it's interesting. I went to drama school for a year, was a fucking awful actor, which is what made me go into stunts instead. I was good at that. But where I found the catharsis, ironically, was writing, and it was my own story, and then doing the audiobooks. And the acting training ultimately did kind of pay in a very different area where I wasn't really acting, but I was kind of articulating stories that I'd written myself. You have this kind of healing element. You fall in love with this profession, and then COVID hits. So talk to me about, again, that jarring transition of this next phase that you're in.
Yeah, that was a tough one for me, because 2020 was mapped out to be a very big year on the acting side. Oddly, I was actually transitioning out of fitness because things were going so well with the other two. And I was happy about it, because it's nice. It would have been nice to have fitness back to myself. But God's plan, man. COVID hit, industry shut down. Not only did it shut down, it just turned into a cesspool of political nonsense. And that for me was a point where I knew I needed to pivot a little bit again, because up to that point, everything that I was doing was reliant on my work in Hollywood. I graduated high school, joined the Marine Corps. I was all military, got out, lost everything, boom, right into Hollywood, straight into the spotlight doing fitness and then acting and stunts. I never had time to work on myself really, but I didn't really understand business. I wasn't very business savvy, business minded. I was just I was hustling, trying to get my life back on track. And looking back on it now, it's not like many people go through a pandemic in their lifetime. It's not something you put on your calendar and plan for. So it definitely took me by surprise and brought me into a whole new world of fitness. It pulled me straight back into all fitness. I started doing online coaching because I'm like, I need to have something that's mine. I need to do something that's mine. And that's when I launched my online coaching business, started working with, executives, CEOs, founders, just high performers, because I'm good at custom stuff. I'm good at being able to take a program and create something that you can implement into your life rather than giving you a program that you have to figure out how to adapt to. And, because that's where most people fail. So that was the beginning of this whole new space I'm in now in the business side. But from what we were talking about before, what makes what I'm doing now more difficult and maybe not as enjoyable is because everybody's a freaking online coach. It doesn't even matter what industry you're in anymore. So that's the hard part of it now is I don't want to represent that coaching space. I'm trying to represent something different. I want to be authentic. I want to be real. I'm not trying to sell you some fake shit. It's like I really do have your best interests at heart, and like I know what it's like to not have a lot of money. I know what it's like to not have any direction. So there's a lot of things that I can speak to that are relatable to a lot of people based on my life experiences, and I feel like that's a big part of why I went through what I went through, is to be able to have that knowledge, to be able to be relatable and be able to impact people on that level.
Was there a jarring element, as you mentioned, the healing began with the acting. Now the acting is kind of, pulled from you. Did you hit a wall again, or were you able to lean into the creation of the fitness space?
I still feel like I'm on the verge of something bigger. And I have a business mentor who I'm working with right now. We're building out some very cool stuff. I'm getting more into the speaking side of things. I'm flying out again tomorrow to Wisconsin for a speaking engagement. I was just in Pennsylvania doing a VFW groundbreaking ceremony. So it's like the acting stuff helped out tremendously because it forced me to be able to speak better and just be able to articulate things better. And also too, kind of part of acting is doing homework, and a lot of the homework is on people, like people watching and character development and all that stuff. So you start to understand human nature a little bit differently than you would otherwise. So all those things have helped me tremendously. And I'm still in the film and TV space. I'm just in it a little more strategically now. Like I don't want to have to rely on it. I want to work in it, and I want to work with people who want to work with me. And I'm still obviously doing my thing on the back end to be ready for when the calls come, because I'm signed on to some different projects right now, hopefully that kick off later this year and the next year. But at the same time, knowing that I have something that's my own now gives me more peace of mind. I can sleep a little better at night, breathe a little better. The film industry is brutal, man. Like you gotta, and unless you make it to the top, you gotta hustle for every job. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. From the outside looking in, everyone wants to be in it, but man, they don't understand that hustle. When you finish that project and you're like, all right, now I got to find the next one. I got to pay the bills. What's the next one? Hustle, 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 hustle.
Yeah, that was one thing when I came back from, because when I worked in Japan, it was as a stuntman. I opened Universal Studios, and we came back, and I was learning now about this industry. And you got to go on set, and you got to try and find the stunt coordinator and give them your resume. And I kind of transitioned into, realizing I could become a firefighter in America once I moved there. And so then I'm like, well, I'm in the Orlando area. There's numerous theme parks. I'm just going to stay with this. But it was understanding how hard it would be. And then also not be able to take all that time off when you were filming if I'm supposed to be, in a fire station. So, but yeah, I don't think people realize, unless you are, as you said, that top tier where now you're with a team and you just get asked to work on a film. These guys are just grafting, and then on the side, waiting tables, working in theme parks, whatever it is, so they can get their next gig.
Yeah, most people don't see that part of it.
No, not at all.
And go to the social media point. Most people won't put that out there that they're doing that.
No,
they want it to look like they're just movie to movie.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm actually working on beginning stages yet, but I'm turning my second book into a TV show. I'm not saying if, it's going to happen, period. So it's interesting because I'm looking at the film industry, the TV industry a little differently now. I'm about to enter that and turn the page in this new chapter in my life. And seeing the need now for real storytelling, like The Pit is a perfect example of real gritty drama, technically advised to a T, perfectly, the medical side is spot on there. And I'm talking to all these people in the industry, and it sounds like everyone is sick and tired now of the kind of wokeism, the PC element. And I remember hearing, why am I blanking on his name? God, the guy that played Iron Man, it just fell out of my head.
Robert
Downey Jr., thank you, on Joe Rogan. And they were both saying that they could never do Tropic Thunder today with his kind of, blackface character. And it's ridiculous, because the whole point of that character was to show the ridiculous racism that used to occur in Hollywood. It's saying the very thing that people are then turning around and stopping it. So with that, you mentioned cesspool. What was that darkness of Hollywood, and where do you hope the next evolution is going to take, the film and television industry?
Man, I see the industry changing a lot from a social media perspective, but also too from the standpoint of California's not the place anymore. LA's not necessarily home base anymore. So a lot of these, well-known actors, these powerhouses in their craft, are living in different states and pushing their politicians to incentivize being able to film there, have those tax credits. So I see everything opening up more across the country to film and TV, which is great. The social media side is very interesting, because we've seen the evolution of the way things were when it was, you went to the theater. When you went to see a movie, you went to the theater. And then streaming came out, and then it was like, there was all these loopholes about how they could not pay you what they would normally have to pay you if it was theatrical. And then now with social media, they're looking for well-known names with followers that they can pay a quarter of the cost and save money. So it's like everything's about freaking greed and money, and it just so I don't know where this thing is going to go. I love seeing a lot of these actors, pushing to have a little more diversity. Wahlberg and McConaughey and those guys, just kind of Mel Gibson, Stallone, just pushing to have some non-woke nonsense. I mean, it's like trying to find a good movie these days is, sometimes you can't even find one, because it's like it's just tattered with politics and identity politics, and everything's got to be about race. And I don't know, man. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I'm again quietly confident that there is this new bloom coming out. Like The Pit did an amazing job. It portrayed people of all walks of life the way it was supposed to be portrayed. There might have been a slight leaning in some, topics, but I think this is what people want. I mean, it's storytelling. It's not supposed to represent every single person on planet Earth in every single production. Right. If you're portraying, Harlem in this area, there might not be a single white face in the whole crowd. There might not be a single gay or disabled. Who knows?
Exactly.
But if you're portraying another area, it might be all white. And so we got to get away from that. But I think the need as well, from what I'm seeing, is reality. I think people are tired of that, polished Hollywood, network television bullshit, where every detective looks like they came out of a Miss World or, the front of Men's Health, and get back to real storytelling and making people uncomfortable. And this is what my story is certainly going to make people fucking uncomfortable. It's a dark, dark story with a beautiful growth journey in, later in the story. But my world, there's nothing pretty about it. The calendars and all that stuff, the two-dimensional stuff that you'll see at firefighters on television up to this point is pretty, Disneyfied, if you like. But our world that we actually exist and the people that are struggling in society that we respond to, you can't curve those edges. You've got to tell those stories the way they actually are. Otherwise, people don't even understand the magnitude of some of these issues.
Yeah. I'm excited to hear your story and see it come to life. And I do agree with you, though. I think things are finally turning a little bit more in the right direction. It's just a matter of, how long is it going to take before we're there, where people can stop focusing on all the stuff that they want to be offended by. I mean, who cares, man? Like, it's entertainment. It doesn't have to be so serious.
No, exactly. And I mean, God, when I was growing up, there was the Benny Hill show, this creepy old dude that was chasing everyone. You know what I mean? there's been that element for a long, long time, but
it's not just because I don't want to. I think what I have to say is a little more important than what supplement you're taking or what type of lifting routine you're doing in the gym.
That mental health piece is so under addressed when it comes to overall, physical wellness. Because obviously we talk about it when we talk about trauma and stuff. Someone had on the show, Johan Hari, told me a story, and he wrote an amazing book called Chasing the Scream, and it's in his book. They did a study, obesity study, and they gave all the recipients IV nutrition. So they had they weren't ingesting anything at all. And obviously they had some sort of movement practice as well. And there was this one woman who was the rock star of the study, lost a shitload of weight. And then one day she just stopped showing up. And they finally tracked her down. I think it was, weeks later, and she put on a bunch of weight. And they were able to get her to come back in and talk to her. And one of the researchers was clever enough to actually kind of ask some background questions. And in that process, he said, well, do you remember how old you were when you started eating food for comfort? And she said, I think it was 12. And he said, was there anything traumatic that happened in your life when you were that age? And she said, yeah, that was when my grandfather started molesting me. And the point was that as this woman had got back down to a healthy weight, she was starting to attract attention from the opposite sex, or more attention from the opposite sex. And in her particular unaddressed trauma story, that was a huge red flag. She didn't want to attract, attention from the same kinds of people that she'd been preyed upon by. So if we're not looking at that trauma, or that, there's mental health struggles that, whether food was just for comfort, whether it was a dopamine hit, whether, God forbid, being thin was actually the issue. And then, like you said, you're just throwing supplements or training plans at people. You're missing a huge part of the puzzle. And even in my class, every 2 months or so, we'll do a sandbag walk to the top of the parking garage next to the gym. And just for no other reason than to get them tired a little bit, and then just talk to them. But checking in with everyone. How are you doing today? Why are you still coming to the gym? What is your goal? And then I've had people talk about domestic abuse and all kinds of things. And that's kind of been part of the healing. That's why they're there. So if you're not, as a coach, addressing exactly like you said, that mental piece, you're missing a huge part of that pie.
Yeah, that's a great example of the underlying root cause of, I would say, probably most of the country is dealing with, to some degree, not the same story, but there's some underlying condition that has caused them to continue down the route that they are. And that goes back to the point of why this fitness journey, that once you get the mind right, it's going to be a journey. Because if you're 40 years old, well, you just spent the last 40 years. It's going to take a little bit of time to address that and get you back physically, internal health, mentally, like all of it comes together. It's going to take a minute. So I think these coaches out there pushing these hacks and these shortcuts and stuff is just completely leading people down the wrong path and taking their money.
I think another area of huge irresponsibility, and I've talked about this a lot, and this spans both sides of the political aisle because we're talking about decades now, is just the environment that we've created in the States in general. And again, rural Iowa, this may not be a thing, but certainly in suburbia, urban areas. I grew up, and I say this a lot, I grew up on a farm in England. We had an orchard, we had a vegetable garden, we had livestock. I was on 70 acres, so I could ride my bike and run and do all the things. So for me to then look down my nose and go, oh, why are you overweight? Why are you out of shape? Is extremely unfair, because if someone grew up in an urban setting and, all they had was concrete around them and the local basketball court was where the gangs hung out and they got their food from McDonald's or the bodega, that's a very different environment that young child grew up in. You talked about Okinawa, healthy food, exercise, community, all these things that I've heard as far as that culture. If you were a young Okinawan, I would argue you're probably set up for success when it comes to longevity and health. If you were king for a day, what would you do culturally in this country to start creating an environment that forges health right at the beginning of someone's life?
It would come down to the food we're eating. Realistically, where all this processed, ultra processed food that gets people addicted to food, I mean, it needs to go away. It's you go into these stores and it's like when you see how much trash is in there, you see how cheap it is, and then you walk to the parts of the store that are healthy and you see how expensive it is. Yeah, it doesn't even make sense. But food can literally be a drug, and food companies hire food scientists to create foods to get people addicted. I mean, we're just pawns in the game here. And at the end of the day, nutrition is the foundation of everything. I mean, it's if you're eating very clean, whole, nutritious foods and you're exercising, you're going to feel completely different, and you're going to think different. You're going to sleep different than if you're eating shit out of packages and wrappers and boxes and, that has 2 paragraphs worth of ingredients on it. You're going to, it's like you don't have any control over the way you feel. Now that controls the way you feel. You're on an emotional roller coaster. You eat a meal, you crash. It's like every day is highs and lows. Probably every time you eat a meal, you don't know how someone's going to react. You don't know how someone's going to talk. I've had conversations with people that are very obese, chronically unhealthy, sick, chronically unhealthy. Just they don't even understand what it feels like to feel normal, because what they feel right now is their normal. So when you start to bring them higher, it's almost like an epiphany for them. They can't believe that this is the way they could feel, that they can feel, that they are feeling. Nutrition, man.
Absolutely. All right. Well, the first of the closing questions: is there a book, or are there books that you'd love to recommend? It can be related to our discussion today or completely unrelated.
The Mountain Is You is a great book. And I think, it's about self-sabotage, but it's one of those books that you don't want to put down. It's like you want to keep reading it, and when you're done, you want to read it again. I think a lot of people will say that I don't self-sabotage myself. I guarantee there's some part of you that has some type of self-sabotaging behavior in there, even if it's to a minute degree, whether it's coming down to believing that you can even accomplish this tiny goal. It's still self-sabotaging behavior. But it's a very interesting book, the way it's framed. I think it's Brianna West or something like that. So I would recommend everyone read it.
I've made 3 T-shirts total in the whole length of this podcast, 9 years. And the most recent one on the back, it says self-care and sabotage, and it's got a heart with a grenade pin in it. So, because again, like
That's
you
good.
said, we're just one long roller coaster. You abstain and you're super healthy and you go to all these workouts, and then, you start drinking and then you crash. And this is, I always say it's about trending. You're going to have your ups and downs regardless. It's like VFib. But if the line is going in the right direction, then you're right. But no one is just a straight line without any hiccups. I don't care what they say, how diligent they are on Instagram. We all have our bad days.
Yeah, absolutely we do. I know I do.
What about films and documentaries that you love?
I'm not good at that one. I haven't really watched a whole lot of anything recently, and to be honest with you, I'm just kind of stuck in my own world doing my own thing. I kind of lost the enjoyment for watching anything.
Mm-hmm. What about one thing I hear that's interesting, even from Josh, is these actors will, do all these scenes, but they really have no idea how the film's actually going to turn out, because obviously it's in the director and in the editor's hands, and then the music and all the things and the way it's cut. What was the production that surprised you the most, from shooting versus the final, screening?
Of what I worked on?
Yeah.
In a good or bad way?
You can choose.
Well, I really thought Terminator Genesis was going to turn out a lot better than it did. But that was a flop. I was so excited for that one. And I'm sucking at these questions.
No, it doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong answer. Just purely, my interest.
Yeah. I wish Old Boy would have done better. That it could have done really good, I think, because it's a crazy movie, and that twist at the end will just completely sabotage your mind. Have you seen it?
I'm trying to remember if I have. Sounds familiar. I mean, I've seen a lot of his. I'm about to go watch Weapons this week. That comes out. That's supposed to be amazing as well. But I'm sure I have. I'm just blanking as the story in my mind.
The original is a Korean movie, and Spike Lee redid it with Josh. But it's about this guy who is like this alcoholic, kind of low life. No one likes him. No one wants to be around him. He has no zest for life. He's just out there, and he gets kidnapped and put in this hotel room. I think it was for like 10 or 20 years. And then while he's in there, he starts getting in shape and wanting to find out who did this. And then he finally gets out and goes on this mission to find out why this happened. And then when you find out at the end, you're like, poof, I did not see that coming. That was crazy. And there's a fight sequence in there that's all one take. And I mean, I forgot how long it is, but I remember how Josh and JJ were like emotional with each other for how it came out. Cause I mean, it was a hell of a fight sequence. It just goes from one floor to another floor to another floor. I mean, just one shot. So yeah, I'm surprised it didn't do better, but it's a pretty cool movie.
I'm gonna have to watch it. It doesn't ring a bell, so it's obviously one that I miss. It's funny as well that when it comes out is a big part. I didn't realize. I had a few guys from Band of Brothers, Captain Dale Dye, and then Shane Taylor, who was the medic in Band of Brothers. But that came out right before 9/11. So even though it's almost like the 10th anniversary is really when it started gaining momentum, imagine working that entire project. And then obviously what happened was absolutely tragic. And of course, it's going to trump that. But what ended up being such an incredible show. I mean, one of the most recommended when I asked that question at the end. But again, the timing was just awful. And then conversely, you can make a god-awful documentary about a guy that has a tiger and it fucking blows up because COVID happens. So you can make a shit show really popular with timing and then vice versa.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Timing's everything.
Absolutely. All right. Well, then the next question, is there a person that you'd recommend to come on this podcast as a guest to speak to the first responders, military, and associated professions of the world?
Oliver Stark?
That rings a bell. I'm trying to remember why.
I got to know him back in LA. He was a client of mine. We became pretty good friends, but he had been an up and coming actor for a while. You know, you'd recognize him in all these different shows and stuff, and then all of a sudden he landed the big time with 911. So he's one of the leads for 911 as a firefighter.
Oh, that'd be brilliant. Yeah,
and he's from your neck of the woods over in where were you from again?
I'm gonna have to wait now. Where do you think I'm from? I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Well, I mean, obviously you're from somewhere over in the UK.
There we go. Okay, good. Yeah, most people say Australia, so you got a better ear than most.
Yeah, so he's over. I can't remember where in the UK he's from, but I mean, you guys have that commonality too.
Yeah, that'd be.
But he's been on that show now for, I mean, from season 1 until I don't even know if it's on anymore.
Okay, yeah, that'd be amazing. I've got another friend. I would say friend, someone I work with in Japan as a stunt person. She's been on Chicago Fire for years as a stunt person too, so it's interesting. But yeah, I mean, if you're able to help me connect, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I'll reach out to him and see if I can get him for you. And you know Eddie Fernandez?
I heard you talking to Christian about it on their podcast, but I don't know if I recognize that name.
He's a big stunt guy. He's been doing it now for I think over 30 years. But his one of his staples is fire. So the first time I got lit on fire was by him.
I need a fire guy for my show. There's a lot of fire in this story, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting actually because I love getting stunt people on. Again, like I said, I was a Weekend Warrior live show guy, but I don't hear stunt people on podcasts very often. You know what I mean? So there's so many people. I got Katie Taylor coming on, who's like a world-class skydiver, stunt woman. You know, there's the people that are in that profession are phenomenal. Most of them are, you know, masters of their craft as well. But it blows me away that they're not in all these podcasts being interviewed all the time. So I love being able to talk to that group because, I mean, people are missing, you know, incredible life stories from these men and women. Yeah,
not only that, you figure what a movie or a TV show would be like without stunts.
Oh, absolutely. I think this was the first time ever, wasn't it, that the Oscars actually had a nod for stunt performers.
Well, I mean, I had heard them talking about it forever. You know, it's like how can there not be a category for stunts, but there's a category for everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, it is impossible to make a good movie without stunts.
I don't even know how that happened. Like, how did that even become a thing? I mean, I grew up with James Bond films. That was the pinnacle of stunt performance. Like, without stunts, there is no James Bond film. I don't understand how you can not recognize that profession.
I don't know, insecurity maybe.
Yeah, probably the ego of the leads back in the day, I would imagine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the last question before we make sure where people can find you and then ultimately this platform you're building, what do you do to decompress?
I'm a homebody, man. I love being at home. I love playing pool. I love going in the pool. I love getting in my sauna. I love doing my cold plunge. I love going on walks. Just all the really simple stuff. That's my jam. I don't like to go out. You know, I don't really hang out at all. I don't put myself in situations where I could potentially get in trouble. I like a no drama, easygoing life. Watch a good movie, kick back, get a massage. Like that's my decompression.
What genre of film do you normally like watching?
Pretty much all action. Mm-hmm. Like I love action. But again, like going back to what we were talking about earlier with filmmaking then versus now, I remember if the content is good, if the storyline is good, if the acting is good, I can watch anything. It's just not the case these days. Mm-hmm. So I just typically trend towards action because that's I don't know. This is what I like.
Well, even, you know, coming from a profession that deals with fire, so obviously we're pretty familiar what it looks like and what it's supposed to look like. deviating to CGI for fire now. You see it with explosions, and it just looks so shit, even in high budget films. So, there's some areas where I'm sure that part of the stunt world felt threatened by, CGI, etc. But, some things absolutely make it a lot safer, not flinging a human being off a skyscraper, for example. But there's other areas, I think, where computers still can't take the place of, for example, a live burn on a show.
No, and the fire, and also too when they're not really firing rounds.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of those CGI After Effects post production effects.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say fire is probably one of the funnest stunts I've done. There's something very surreal about it. It's almost like you're in a tunnel. You can't hear anything except the flames. I don't even know how to describe it. It was very, very serene.
Mm-hmm. It is. I mean, the crazy thing is my backstory. When I was 4 years old, I was in a house fire, and my 8-year-old sister got us out. So if you're talking about paths, either you go one way or the other. You'd think I'd be terrified of fire, but instead I became a firefighter, which is bizarre. But I have that very thing. Like I always remember feeling, unless it was, super dangerous and you're in a bad spot, I thought it was beautiful. And it was a shame to put it out almost in a way. You have to, otherwise you burn up and die, but that's your job, firefighter. But it is, I mean, it is kind of almost mesmerizing in a way when you're surrounded by fire.
Yeah, it's a very indescribable thing. It's probably one of the, if I had to say what my favorite stunts were, I would say it's fire, driving, and swimming, water work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I actually auditioned for Waterworld, the live show, when I was in Japan. But it was me and one of my good friends, and he was, we were equal. He was already embedded with that group. He got the role, and rightly so. But that's a fun show. There's a fire dive, 30-foot. I think 30 foot. I think I got that right. They're on fire, and these are like world class high divers doing that. There's jet skis and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, that from a stunt show point of view, that's one I would have loved to have done, was the water show.
So what is your full time right now?
So now I am in the adrenaline infused world of podcasting and writing books.
So this is your whole gig.
This is it, yeah. So you talk about struggling with identity. Yeah, there's no podcast calendars around where you take your shirt off. That's for sure. So yeah, you have to really be able to settle your ego, because now you're literally known for what you do. It's not who you are anymore. It's not that identity. So being a stuntman is cool. Being a firefighter is cool. Paramedic, but yeah, this is what I'm doing now but it's a force multiplier. You're taking that journey that you've had, and now you're kind of older and wiser. It's like, well, how can I use that and help lots of people, rather than, for example, just respond to one person at a time on a fire engine? So it's a really interesting, new chapter. But as far as humility, you got to let that ego go, because you're not that thing that you identified before. You're just not, and you couldn't be further from it now. You're sitting talking to a microphone or writing books. So it's powerful. I think it's the medium that really makes a difference in the world. But yeah, from an ego point of view, you've got to have a kind of ego death to move forward from that.
Yeah, I can understand that. That's awesome, man.
Thank you. Well, for people listening then, firstly, where can they find the coaching platform that you're building?
So I'm going to launch it probably in about another week or two, but it'll be on my website, aaronwilliamson.net, or in any of my social media links in the handle.
Brilliant.
Aaron V Williamson on Instagram is where I'm most active. I'm still trying to get the hang of the social media stuff. I mean, if I didn't have to be on it, man, I wouldn't be on it.
It's literally a double-edged sword. Of course, it allows you to get things out into the real world, but from, for example, the air quotes influencer thing, I had an Instagram account at one point that had 220,000 people on, and it was just from sharing the podcast, sharing, stories of positivity, and it got shut down. Like, not even a warning, just smited from the earth. But before it did, that's a lot of people really in this platform. And this kind of impression that people have that, yeah, if you've got this large following, then you just go on there and you talk about a product or whatever, and then all of a sudden everyone's going to buy it. It's bullshit. It really is. Otherwise, I would have sold a lot of books, and I didn't. So, I think, being honest and genuine on social media is powerful, and it is a way of disseminating information. But what I've learned is ultimately it's still, is what you've got good? It's that simple. If it is good and honest, then word will get around, and that's ultimately is going to be what spreads it. And as you alluded to earlier, if you are a two-dimensional person touting whatever because that company's paying you, you might make a little money for a little bit, but the longevity isn't going to be there.
Yeah. And it waters your brand, waters your name.
Absolutely.
Waters down.
Well, Aaron, I want to say thank you. It's been such an amazing conversation, such an interesting, journey that you've had, within uniform itself, and then obviously your transition into the acting and stunt space, and then now, what you're building with the coaching. So I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
I appreciate you. It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you.